This presentation is about utopian socialism. Utopian socialism happened before scientific socialism and was really centered around 1800 and after. Utopian socialism is distinguished by two characteristics. One is that utopian socialists thought that somehow the socialist economy would come about voluntarily. In some way, industrialists and people who owned things would voluntarily reconfigure the system and share it with people who didn't. Secondly, utopian socialists found the inspiration for their socialist economy in Christian principles. The idea that in the Gospels, Jesus will tell us if somebody asks for your shirt, give them your coat too, or give to Caesar what is Caesar's, this coin, whereas give to God what is God, share with people, treat others as your brothers, treat others as you'd like for them to treat you. Utopian socialists got the reputation for being dreamers because they focused a lot of time on thinking of the models of socialism rather than how it would come about. They didn't ever come up with any real practical model that made socialism happen, or at least not before Karl Marx came up with his communist model of violently taking over what industrialists had. Robert Owen and a group of factory owners thought that maybe they could get socialist economy to happen by creating factories that were models of sharing, where both the industrialist and the worker benefited. He created new Lanark mills in England, but it never, nobody else ever took up the model. He thought that maybe Europeans were just too stuffy and traditional to change, so he moved to the United States, and I believe in Indiana, he created a model factory, but he found that the Americans weren't any more interested in a socialist model than the Europeans were. Another group of utopian socialists thought that maybe the Pope would help to bring about a socialist economy through his proclamations, but that didn't happen. And another group of utopian socialists thought that people would bring this about if the conversation could just happen. So they spent a lot of time writing to the editorial section of the newspapers trying to get a conversation started, but it never amounted to anything. Utopian socialism ultimately did result in something called European socialism, which is kind of a partial socialist system. In European socialism, such as in Sweden, common property is achieved, or redistribution of property is achieved by imposing or by agreeing to a high income tax. Each person works kind of like we work in the United States, getting paid a salary based on what they do that could be different depending on how skilled you are. And then each person pays a certain 60% income tax, or 60% of their income to a tax, which pays for public services such as university education and health care, etc., things that are available to everybody in the society based on their need. That common socialist principle of from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. European socialism is something that's voluntary. European socialism happens in governments that are representative governments. It's not an oppressive situation. Another group of utopian socialists that operated on a smaller scale, especially in places like Israel or any place where they had communes or collective farms and factories, they would implement this common collective ownership of property on a small scale that looked something like this. You would have a farm where you had a lot of people living, you had, houses there, and all the children were watched by a common daycare system. Certain people went out and worked on the farm. Some people were involved with selling the farm products. Some people were involved with cooking for everybody for that night. And then, but nobody got paid when the products from the farm or factory were sold on the open market. The money that came in would simply support everybody. So it's a different model than the European socialism, and it really only worked on a small scale.